starting, right? Those of you who don't have a seat, I would encourage you to get a little bit creative. We have a little bit of standing room here and a little bit of standing room in the back. I am going to try to get some extra seats. It might just take a couple of minutes. Sounds good? Welcome everyone to the Great Minds Raise Faces speaker series. My name is Christelle Hales, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm so happy that you are all here. As always, to familiar faces in the crowd, I say thank you and welcome back. To new faces, I'm excited that you've joined us here today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at future events. Wink, wink. The Great Minds Raise Faces is dedicated to working towards infusing themes of diversity, equity, and inclusion into our daily conversations and thought processes. Every session we bring a speaker to share their expertise on how DEI influences STEM and vice versa. I'm confident that with crowds like this, having the conversations we are about to have, we will learn just how impactful we can be as a community. We'll get started in just a moment, but before we dive in, there are a couple of things you should know. One, for those of you who brought two friends to participate in the WPI giveaway opportunity, find me after the session in the back, where I will be handing out all the giveaways. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, do not fret. You can find the details of this opportunity in the RSVP confirmation email I sent you. And if you didn't participate in this session, you can participate in any of the next ones, so don't worry. Two, I would like to give a shout out to grad students. They showed up in droves today from the RSVPs, specifically from robotic engineering and data science. But I would also like to give a shout out to Professor Yunus Khalil in the back. He made this as an extra credit, so that also is a great explanation. This event is being recorded for those who may not be able to be present, but still want to engage and participate. If you have any kind of issue with that, please pull me aside and let me know, and won't be an issue. The next Great Minds Raise Faces will be tomorrow, October 1st. Right in this location, so we'll be right back here again tomorrow, same time. Our very own Evan Brunel from Undergraduate Enrollment Services will present on his experience as a member of the deaf community, and will walk us through the spectrum of deafness and the hidden challenges that are confronted on a daily basis. Last thing, we have the Great Minds Raise Faces sessions during the lunch hour because we understand that everyone is busy, and we want to make sure that you get fed, right? So during the session, if you need to get up to get more food, get some water, or go to your next destination, that's completely fine. We just ask that you please be respectful of those around you and do so as quietly as possible. Okay? Now, without further ado, I'd like to present our speaker, Lolita Taub. Lolita Taub is a two-time TEDx speaker, a World Economic Forum global shaper, an enterprise tech professional, and an early-stage tech investor. Currently, Lolita serves as the Chief of Staff at Catalyte, a workforce data science company that uses artificial intelligence to identify individuals, regardless of background, who have the innate potential and cognitive ability to be great software developers. With her decade-long operator career in B2B enterprise, tech, startups, and early-stage venture capital, Lolita's interests lie at the intersection of artificial intelligence and business. She is also a venture partner at NexGen and LP at Portfolia's Enterprise Fund, and was a former VC at Backstage Capital and K-Fund. Please join me in giving Lolita a WPI welcome.
Hello, WPI. It's so nice to be here. What a beautiful campus you have here. I mean, honestly, I came up from Baltimore and I was able to go for a hike. You have such a beautiful community here. So super excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here on campus. You learned a little bit about me. I'm just going to give a recap. So I've been in enterprise tech for 12 plus years now, and I have three perspectives. One comes from a corporate environment, working for IBM and Cisco. The second one's in startups, so working in startups in Silicon Valley and New York. And the third one is venture capital. So I've worn a lot of hats, and now, as was mentioned, I'm Chief of Staff at Catalyte. So these are the three perspectives that I bring. Now, when we talk about artificial intelligence and how this all came about into my life, my entire career has been technology. So I've been looking and seeing how can technology enable our lives to be better? What is the technology that's really going to drive a lot of change? And for me, that's come to be artificial intelligence. So a few years back, I started a Huffington Post series called Cognitive Business, and I interviewed investors and startup founders and just the brilliant minds that are out there in artificial intelligence. And what got me really excited about it was all of the things that could be possible by AI. So I started talking about it. I did a TEDx on raising AI, from which today's conversation is very much inspired by. And I started talking about diversity inclusion because I'm a woman of color, and it seemed interesting to know that I want that the technology that's going to come in and disrupt every industry to also include me and include everyone who has any kind of diverse background. We're all diverse, right? So in my life, my mission is to promote technology, and in a world where diversity, the population and the diversity of our population is creating and leading the technology that will be here to serve not just a few elite, but the many, so that we can have the products and the services that serve us all. So with that being said, we're going to just jump into the Raising Inclusive AI conversation, how to keep bias out. So we know that AI can do a lot of great, but we also know that it can do a lot of bad. Today we're going to focus on biases. But before we jump into that, we're going to cover the basics, because I understand that we have different levels of backgrounds in the room. We have technical folks, we have non-technical folks, so we want to make sure to cover the foundations and then make this an interactive conversation. So if at any point you have any questions, raise your hand. We have a couple of really cool exercises that we're going to get into. So what is AI? A lot of the time when I talk about AI, here's the image that a lot of people will think of. They'll think of RoboCop, Terminator, Ex Machina, because that's the newest movie that Hollywood came out with. And this is what it's not, right? The AI is a lot, in its basic shape, it's really a shell of code that intakes lots of data and analyzes it and comes out with some human smart output, right? And it looks more like this, not like that, okay? So here's this is a foundational, really important fact here, not that, this. So as we move forward, so the next question I usually get is, okay, so AI, great, it looks like code, but where is it? Are we using it today? Or is it something in the future where robots will be the AIs? And as it turns out, we all use AI every day. AI is really an umbrella of technology, and there's different ways that we use it on a daily basis. It could be machine learning, where Google uses machine learning, right? So if you are ever trying to get from point A to point B and trying to figure out the fastest way to get there, you're probably going to use Google and take the route that takes 5 minutes less, right? And what Google is doing is it's intaking data and coming out with that. So that is machine learning. Another example of this is Facebook. Everybody and their mothers and grandmothers are now on Facebook. And I'm sure that you've seen this little box that shows up when you post pictures. And in previous years, it was just a little box that said, do you want to tag a friend? Today, it actually has the little frame, and it says, do you want to tag yourself? Do you want to tag this person that you already know? Because they're so smart, right? They already know who we are. And that is computer vision, right? So understanding what are we seeing in pictures, understanding patterns. And there's other ways that you guys are using AI today. I mean, if you think about lifts, scooters nowadays, any Airbnb, Netflix, right? How is it that Netflix always knows what we like? It's because it's ingesting a lot of data based on what we like and producing the kind of recommendations that we like, similar to Amazon and similar to Google. And so when you're starting to search things, Google's now personalizing even your search preview So if you and your friends sit next to each other and you search for the same thing, you might get different things just based on what your profile is like, the demographics, the data set that Google has gotten from you, just from your Google searches and from following you on everything that you do. So these are some use cases, because sometimes it's true, we talk about AI, but what does it mean? At the end of the day, if AI is doing its job, you won't know that you're using AI. You won't know that when you're on Instagram and you're putting on a filter to make you look like an angel or a dog or a throwing up rainbow unicorn, like, you won't know. You won't be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm using AI. It'll just be like, wow, this is cool. This is convenient, right? So these are some of the use cases. In terms of where is AI going, this is also a really interesting topic. Well, it's starting to look more and more and more like humans. So we start here with the Echo, Alexa situation here. Maybe you have a Google Dot. Maybe it's just your Google Assistant where you on your phone or on your watch, you're like, hey, tell me what the weather is like. What do I need to buy? Right? You start to use these things, and it's just responsive, right? So you can probably say, hey, Alexa, I want to buy this. And all of a sudden, now you can buy things, right? So it's moving more towards the direction of human interaction. Here we have Pepper. If you haven't heard of Pepper, it's this great robot that is actually being deployed for hospitality purposes. So if you go to a hotel, you might be greeted with Pepper, who is conveniently telling you where you can spend your money or where you can go, right? So this is, and then I'm sure all of you are familiar with Tesla, right? This concept of autonomous vehicles, autonomous planes. We're not quite there yet, but we're working into that direction. How do you give objects that are moving visibility? How do you give computers vision and have it be precise enough to actually function like a human being? So not a human, but a car like a human, right? So that's kind of what we're seeing. And this last one, a little controversial here. I don't know if you guys know what this is. It's a sex robot. But all to say, really, there's a spectrum of where technology is heading, where AI is heading, and the thing is, we can't stop it. It's not, is it? It's more of, when is it going to happen? And so we're moving towards technology that is more and more like humans. That's great. That's great because, well, people need to sleep, and computers don't. AI doesn't need to sleep. Servers don't need to sleep. They might need to be rebooted. But at the end of the day, what is so great about AI and technology in general today is that technology is getting faster, cheaper, better. I mean, computers today can actually see better, identify images better than humans. Isn't that crazy? That is so wild. And that's exactly why AI is so amazing, because it can actually do a lot of things that we can do, but probably better. Today, it's in silos, so what we call narrow AI, so it'll do one specific thing better, right? So if we say computers, this computer algorithm can see better than a human. This algorithm can help you map out how to get from point A to point B in the best way possible. So this is what we mean by narrow AI. This concept of singularity, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, this concept of when technology is as smart and supersedes the intelligence of humanity, we are moving towards that, but we're not there yet. But the thing is that AI is here to stay, and we know why, because it doesn't need to go to sleep, take breaks or vacations. So it's going to happen. Now, some of us may think of, well, how does that apply to our daily lives? Like, how can it be actually really useful for us? It could be very useful in many different ways. Usually people talk about how we're going to lose our jobs to technology, and this may be the case, but I mean already, I don't know if you've been keeping up with the trends on jobs, but right now Amazon has 30,000 openings. By next year, it's estimated that we'll have 1 million technical jobs that are open and unfilled. So there's a lot of good stuff that's coming out of technology, but of course we're going to talk about bias next, so there's some things that are not so good. But what is really awesome is not just that jobs will be created, but that if you think about AI from a personal and professional perspective and you put on your optimistic hat, you start to see how it can be super beneficial. So in your day-to-day jobs, think about all the mundane tasks that you have to do. Maybe at the library, there's things that you really don't want to do, or that you can just have an algorithm figure out for you, right? If you're a venture capitalist, you'll want to analyze deal flow and see which companies, if I invest in them, will give me the biggest returns. If you're a business person, you'll be interested in how do I increase the productivity or efficiencies of our operations. You start to get the gist of it. There's so many different applications where if you have a computer and AI algorithms, machine learning, computer vision, the spectrum of things, to do it for you, it actually complements our work and allows us to do more of the strategic things and not the mundane things. From a personal life perspective, I don't know how many of you have wearable technology, but it can help monitor your health, right? If you suffer from depression, Asperger's, all types of things, AI can really help start addressing some of those issues. If you have diabetes, for example, it can simulate what your intake of glucose needs to be, when you need to do it, and tell you. So it's a proactive thing. In fact, my watch today, using machine learning, will tell me, hey, you need to breathe because your heart rate is too high. Or you need to stand up because you've been sitting for too long. And this is the kind of thing where AI starts being really helpful for us as human beings. And it can do a plenitude of things. Really, our imagination is the limit with what AI can do. However, there's a catch, because in order for AI to be helpful to all of us, to the diversity of our population, it needs all of us. It needs each and every one of you to participate in the conversation, to participate in creating and leading the technology, because AI amplifies who we are as humanity, right? And when you start to think about that, you start to think about this. I start to think about this kid. Does anybody recognize this picture? Yes, I see some nodding heads, right? So David, if you haven't watched the movie, is an AI boy in an AI movie. And basically, in this society, in this movie, parents are unable to have, adults are unable to have kids, and they start going and purchasing these AI kids. And David is one of the kids, and through the movie, you learn that they need to be reared just like a human child. So you need to think about what kind of kid do you want to raise. And I love this analogy because it's exactly where we are with AI. We're at a place where we have to think about, okay, so we know what it is, we know it can do good, but the thing is, it won't just magically happen. It'll be by raising AI in the way that we want to see it. And if you take the analogy of raising a child and you think about the concept of raising a child that is both good and inclusive, it starts to trickle some of those, oh, that's interesting. I thought it would just do it by itself because isn't it technology? Well, no, it has a lot to do with who we are as human beings. So before we get started on talking about how exactly we start to raise AI to be good and inclusive, we're going to do our first exercise, okay? So everybody has a sheet of paper. We have, I think, everybody against the wall. People against the wall, I think, get to work together. Yes? Great. And what I would love for everybody to do is to work within your tables. Take a look at this resume that you have in front of you And I want you to think about, I'll give you 5 minutes. I want you to think about whether you would hire this person or not. And then I want you to think about how much you would pay them.
For what job? Yeah.
For an entry-level tech job. Please work with your table. I will be asking a few people to volunteer the thoughts of the table. Yes?
What's the date today?
What is today's date?
Yeah, I'm looking at the dates on the resume.
Okay, let's just pretend it's right after the last thing that they did. Okay?
So they didn't take 3 gap years or something?
Nope, not 3 gap years. Good question. Who are going to be the brave souls who are going to share their thoughts on, do we hire this person, yes or no? And if so, how much do we pay them? We need a couple volunteers, okay? Entry level. No, okay. Anybody who said yes? No one would hire them. No one? Okay, yes, I have a yes here. Okay. All right.
Level, it's okay. I mean, more than okay.
More than okay.
Because, like, it has so many.
Yes.
Well, I think I'd do an interview and want to find out why they wanted it.
Very good. For today's exercise, it's just based on the resume, right? So we have yes and no. Anybody who would like to share? Anything else? Okay. Let me ask. What's the name on your resume? What's the name on the resume? Ebony. What's the resume? Robert. Ooh. Ooh. Okay. So this is obviously not an exercise about admitting people or not. It's an exercise on, you guessed it, bias. Okay. So here's the thing. We know all about AI. We hear about it. We talked about the foundations of it. Now you know about it. And if we're talking about raising this kid, Robert would be great to raise, but maybe not Ebony. Is that interesting? Anyone want to share observations on just what we just did?
Well, so what we talked about was that this person was overqualified, and so like regardless of whatever was in the resume, I would just consider the person a risk, right? Because they're probably going to fail as soon as they can actually get
Okay.
to work.
Okay.
So I don't know, like.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Right. I can kind of like I see the male female part of it, right? And like how the racial profile might come in, but like at the same time, like I wouldn't hire anyone that looks this good on a resume for an entry level position.
Okay.
I was going to say that you only asked 2 tables, whereas in like I was very much going, no, I wouldn't hire this guy.
You would not.
But that's because honestly, like it's my own personal bias. It does not sound like this is somebody who would respect me, and so like that's the opposite bias. I don't need him to follow my instructions. He's bragging about like going to Harvard and all these percentage things.
Yeah.
Nothing about diversity or like.
Right? Okay, so anybody wanted to share a couple more observations? These are all really great. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to? Sounds like maybe you want to share something? No, just scratching your head. Okay.
I'll just say I think it would have been a different discussion if it was an entry-level position and there was questionable experience on the resume, right? So I think one of the challenges we're having is the person is, in most cases, overqualified. But had it been someone who had questionable experience, we may have taken a chance on a man versus a woman in this case, or on a person of color.
Right. The thing is, we would never know, right? And the point of this exercise is this. The underlying theme is we had someone actually say, it would be my bias, right? We all have bias, and this is the point. As human beings, we can justify what we see. Whether you would hire Robert or Ebony, it doesn't matter. The resumes are exactly the same. And the point is not, do we have the right argument? The point is that we all have different perspectives. We all have different backgrounds, and this leads to bias. It doesn't mean that you're being intentionally unfair or intentionally racist or sexist, but it does mean that as humans, we have what's called unconscious bias, right? So you may be aware of it or not. And in order to answer this question of how do we keep bias out in technology, we need to first start with our own bias and being aware of it. And whether you agree with this activity or not, this activity was actually inspired by a Harvard business case study. And it was originally just basically two white people, a white male and a white female, whose resumes were reviewed. It wasn't this resume. It doesn't really matter what it is. But what came out in the Harvard case study was when the male resume was looked at, people thought, oh my God, this guy's so awesome. Look at all the things he's done. Let's hire him. And for the female, it was the opposite. It was a white-sounding name, so I actually changed things up a little bit. I chose one of the whitest male names I could find and one of the blackest female names I could find, based on just statistics, right? Because the point is that for the woman resume, for the Harvard business case study, she was seen as not really the ideal candidate. And so again, this is just to highlight, and the one thing that I want you to take out of this is, how do we keep bias out? We start with ourselves, being aware that every single one of us, even me, has some sort of bias. And to be aware of it is so important before you can say, how do you keep bias out of X thing, out of technology, right? Anyone want to share any thoughts after hearing that? Anyone surprised? Because there's so many people, sometimes it's really hard to admit that we all carry bias. It's really hard. This is why I did this activity. So before we can get back to the question of how do you raise AI to be good and inclusive, we need to talk about the bias in ourselves. Now let's look at the bias that's out there. These are just some examples of what's happening. So Amazon had to scrape their secret AI recruiting tool because it was being sexist. It was basically turning away women candidates based on their algorithm. You have Google's hate speech detecting AI. If you Google Chief Executive Officer in tech, here's what you see. There's a little bit of diversity, some people would say, but not much, right? And are these the only faces that Google can put up there? It's an algorithm that's pulling these guys up. Here's an example from a few years ago. This is very controversial and was pulled off. Microsoft decided, hey, let's do an AI bot and put it on Twitter. And let's have it learn from Twitter conversations. Let's see what happens. It'll be human-like, right? And what ended up happening was that it became anti-Semitic, sexist, and racist. And it had to be pulled off. So this is the world that we live in. The good thing is that we're still at the infancy of AI. These are examples of what we don't want if we want an inclusive AI, right? An inclusive, good AI. But these are really important to acknowledge because this is the reality that we live in. Okay, so now that we've seen that there's bias amongst us and in technology, let's go to exercise number 2. Everyone take out your phone, and I want you to go to this website, quickdraw.withgoogle.com. Give you just a few minutes to play with it. Not everyone has to participate. You don't have to if you don't want to take out your phone. But it's really cool. This is actually an algorithm that is telling you, hey, you can teach us you can teach this algorithm how to identify images. And I want you to just try it. So again, it's quickdraw.withgoogle.com. And just take a couple minutes. And just, I can hear some people using it already. And you can keep your volume up, actually, because that's the fun of it. You actually hear an AI identifying your drawing. We also find out how good of a drawer you are and how well the AI has been programmed and trained. Okay, everyone's having a lot of fun, so now we could stop the fun game. All right. The whole point of this activity is for you to see how easy it is for us to train an algorithm. It means we have the power to change AI, right? Like, this is how easy it is to help raise AI. You literally just helped Google get better at identifying objects. Someone's still having a lot of fun doing it. So here's mine. Here's my skull. That doesn't really look like a skull, but AI is so good that it was like, hey, that's a skull. So let me pause there and just, anyone have any thoughts on this? Had anybody not played it before? Because I know this has been out. Oh, gosh. Okay. You guys are all new. So I'm sure you can share it with your friends and be like, look, I'm so cool. Let's train algorithms together. Anyone want to share maybe an observation or reaction to how easy it is to train an algorithm?
If you're drawing what it tells you to draw, how can it not know what you're drawing? I don't understand the premise.
Great question. Great question. So the point of this algorithm is literally that Google is saying, I want to train my algorithm to be able to identify X thing. And so it's giving it a framework of, this is what I want it to learn how to identify. And if there's so millions of data points that say this is a skull, it starts looking and analyzing that data set and looking for patterns. So it's intentional. So if you do it, you will get the AI will not get it right every single time, because the whole point of it is to learn how to identify these things. Now, why would that be important to Google? Well, if it could see things and it can identify things, it can have more data points on you, right? Does that help answer your question? The whole point is, can you train an algorithm? Who has used CAPTCHAs before? Who has seen CAPTCHAs that say, identify all the lights here, or the bikes, or the cars, and you're like, damn it, that was a car. Why does it make me do another CAPTCHA? All right, so why is it you're actually training an algorithm when you're using CAPTCHAs. And to your question, you'd say, well, why does it ask me if it already knows? Well, no, the actual thing is that it doesn't. And technology companies are trying to figure out, how do we get the technology to identify lights and bikes and cars? So we're constantly training algorithms, whether we know it or not. What I liked about this particular example is that this website actually tells you, please help us train an algorithm. But most of the time, you won't see that. Here's another example. This one we won't get into because it's almost 1 o'clock too. So we're watching the time. But this was something that went viral a couple weeks ago. Did anybody see anything about Imagenet? Anyone want to raise your hand? Okay, you saw it.
Yeah.
What is it?
So it has been trained by Google initially. So it gives you, like, if I take a photo of post it will give you like a poor kid. So that's what, like, most of the Indians who are dark in color, it will give you such racially biased.
Yes. So good point. You're jumping ahead on you're stealing my thunder. So I put a picture here, and it was kind of nice. It described me as a lassie, young girl, and I don't know how to say this, but it means I'm an unmarried woman. Well, it was wrong, but. And I thought, oh my God, this is so fun. We're training an algorithm. I want to see what happens. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is learning how to identify, categorize people. And it doesn't seem so harmful until I started digging into it. This is literally fresh. They actually, I have to tell you that they had to pull off all the data, and they stopped this experiment because it got so fucking bad. Ooh, I guess I shouldn't say that. But it was really bad. You can just mute that out. So this guy's like, hey, this is so interesting. Except it started saying, oh, you're a black guy? Negroid. Oh, this person? First-time offender. What? Oh my gosh, talk about bias and AI. So they pulled the whole thing off. And so initially I was going to have you guys play with it, but this morning I went to the website and they actually have an essay about what they're doing and what's working. So if you go to this website, there's actually a very thoughtful essay that talks about the process of training algorithms and the things that happened that went wrong with this. Okay, so this is a really interesting example. This whole second exercise was all about understanding how easy it is to train an algorithm and where we are with the situation. So maybe you can share some observations since you and your friends started using this. Yep. Tell us about any observations from this particular Imagenet experiment and what?
It is basically, initially it was trained with the whole, like we think there is some magic happening, but all of it is based on the data that has been captured and what kind of data the neural network has been trained on.
Yes.
So if there are biases in there, it will like amplify
yeah.
whatever is there and you will show it. It's not like it's purposely being it doesn't have that kind of intelligence that this is racist or this is sexist. Right. So it is the human intelligence of...
I love that. So yeah, because AI is neither biased or unbiased. It's neither good or bad. It's just what we make of it, how we raise it. There's another comment in the background?
Well, I just want to start by saying when I walked in here, I thought it was RoboCop. I have been thinking about it, and I'm reminded of a book called Critical Fabulations, where a feminist designer writes about how ESPN Women invites a group of women to come to an event in Silicon Valley to help develop its new app, right? And so what she ended up going on to talk about, which is what I hope you're going to get to here, is part of the problem with bias here is that it's who's not in there, right? So it's like if you to go to the Silicon Valley startup and develop this app, you have to be, one, live in the area and probably have transportation to get there. You have to be comfortable enough to be in that crowd. Right? You have to have access to a smartphone or a computer or something like that, and be willing to comfortably talk about that with the group that you're with. And so, I guess where I see bias is who's not there. It's easy for us to draw pictures and things like that and inform it, and then show where our biases are. But what about those people who don't have access to it?
Yes, absolutely. So great points. I mean, you both touched on 2 points that I wanted to talk about. Oh, well, you'll catch it on video. What's so important to know is, hey, bias is out there. Technology is going to amplify it if we don't do anything about it. And to your point, it's all about the data set. Well, I wouldn't say all of it is about the data set. It's about who's creating this technology, who's leading this technology, what data we're using, what data are we not using, who's included in this data, who's not, is anyone monitoring this? Because AI is not like any software out there where you just program something and you leave it and it's done. It's more like a radio that if anybody still uses radios, or I know there might be some people so young that you're like, what, radio? But it's a tuning machine. You have to tune it, and there has to be someone to be aware of it. And if there's a homogeneous group creating, leading it, and manning this bias process, guess what's going to happen? We are going to see more bias. And so in terms of what do we do? What can we do? It's literally thinking about each and every one of you. It doesn't matter whether you're technical or not technical, whether you're an academic. Here's Fei. She's a professor at Stanford. She is all about using AI to support humanity. Elon Musk, everyone probably knows who he is. A little crazy, but he's actually all about also looking at how AI can be used, right, to progress humanity. Some of his ideas are good and healthy. Some of them are, you know. But the whole point is this. Whether you're an academic, a business person, or anybody else, in order to address the problem of bias in AI and in the world, we first need to think about ourselves as humans. And we need to be really intentional about creating technology that is inclusive. And then we need to go out there and do something about it. And today's exercises that we did were meant to be that, to show you, hey, we're human, we're all part of this. You help train an algorithm, you're part of the people who are creating it, even if you don't do anything. But the call to action here, and really the answer to the question, how do we keep bias out, is by thinking about your position and the things that you do. So if you're technical and you care about inclusive technology, you want to go and work for those AI-centric companies, which in a few years it's going to be all of them, or startups, and influence this, voice this important factor out that we need to make sure that the way they were creating, leading, and managing the data, where we're getting the data set, and if the data set is inclusive, right? So go out there, and you can even, whether you're not working for the companies, you can start your own algorithms that are foundationally based on being more inclusive and addressing the topic of bias. So whether you're using IBM Bluemix or Cortana from Microsoft or TensorFlow from Google, there's so many different places where you can start working on the technology and actually building for an inclusive technology set. If you're not technical but you want to be technical, the company that I'm working for, one of the reasons why I joined was that we're actually looking at everybody and saying, hey, you know what, you don't need to be in Silicon Valley or anywhere else. We believe that talent is distributed equally and everybody has the potential of becoming a great technologist and working on data science, on software engineering in general, and AI. And so if you look at companies like Catalyte who are identifying potential talent, training, hiring, and deploying, that means we have a more inclusive community that's creating, leading, and monitoring the inclusivity of the technology. If you're in the third group where you're just like, I'm not a technical person and I don't want to be one, I think it's still really important for you to consider the Google searches you make, the data you put out there, how inclusive are you being, right? And if you want to be part of the conversation and be part of the community that's making technology more inclusive, it's not that hard. You just start to voice out your opinion about how important it is to be inclusive in our data sets, the diversity that is recruited into technology teams. We have to get out there. If you're a lawyer, you know, we need legal people to address the ethical regulation issues. I mean, if we have lawyers and legal policies that say we must be inclusive, guess what's going to happen? That's going to help from a legal perspective. If you're an entrepreneur, building those technology companies with a foundation of inclusivity, not just on the teams, but also in the technology. If you're creative, when you start thinking about using ways of demonstrating your work, whether it's using AI, I mean, I'm sure some of you have seen some of those apps where AI now just builds like amazing Van Gogh paintings and stuff, and people are buying them for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're like, wait, what? I mean, you have to think about every aspect of society, whether it's personal or technical, it's all blurring in a world of AI. We talked a lot about AIs moving towards being more human, and so in every aspect that you can think of, there's a way for you to come in and be part of that conversation, to voice out the importance of having inclusive data, teams, everything, right? And every one of you, you proved it to yourselves today. You can help train AI. You can help raise AI. And we need to be really crystal clear on the fact that there is an issue. Then we need to identify what does inclusivity mean, and then figure out how are we going to do it. And today I gave you three different paths that you can pursue. But what I'm 100% sure of is that no matter whether you get out of this room and never do anything about this, AI is here to stay. AI is disrupting every industry. You're seeing it in the labor market, but you're going to continue to see it. It's not going to go away. So it's up to you to think about, what do you want to do? You know you can do something, and it's super easy, as you saw in that game that everybody seemed to love. And I'm 100% sure that if we all go out there as a diverse population and we're intentional about how we create, grow, lead, guide AI to be good and inclusive, we will get there. Thank you.